So shooters and reloaders out there, Fortune Cookie 45 LLC coming to you from the hot lead zone. And what do these items here have in common? And sure, that's a bit of a trick question. Reloaders have misconceptions about these things. For instance, even though we're told that scales like this are accurate to plus and minus 1/10 of a grain, and reloaders know that, but when we actually use this, we treat it as if this thing is bullseye. It's 0, 0, 0 accuracy. In other words, it's right on. You measure 10 grains, you got 10 grains. Even though in the back of our mind we know we're off by 1/10 either way. But no problem, the reloading data, the starting loads takes care of safety all over that. So it's not a problem. Well, what about these? These are full-length sizing dies. And shooters and reloaders have come to really trust these, and why not? The misconceptions on these things is because we're oftentimes told that if you have more than one rifle, just go ahead and full-length resize all your brass. If you have a semi-automatic rifle or a lever-action rifle or a slide-action rifle, just full-length resize your brass. As if full-length resizing is a basis. And we're told if you're hunting, you don't want to have any problems out there in the hunting fields with your ammo. Full-length resize your brass. In fact, for serious use of our ammo, full-length resize our brass. So we're kind of conditioned that full-length resizing is the basis, and we can't go wrong full-length resizing our brass. If in doubt, full-length resize your brass. But that's a misconception. Now, in case you're wondering, that's a Forster 25-06 full-length resizer, and this one is a Lee 308 Winchester full-length resizer. Now, instructions that come with reloading die sets and presses are all pretty uniform. They tell you how to set up the die and then go ahead and use the die to reload your cases. Well, full-length sizer for Lee says not only do you go ahead and contact a shell holder when you screw the die down into the press, but then you lower the ram and give the resizing die, the full-length resizing die, an additional 1/4 to 1/3 turn more, and then set your die lock ring there. Well, doesn't that sound a little unusual? Because what happens is if you go a little more than a third turn? What happens if you do a little less than a quarter turn or anywhere in between? Where's all that variation? What's that going to do? But we don't worry about that. The reason why this is important is because we're dealing with headspace here. And headspace is very important because it deals with safety and secondarily with performance, accuracy, and functioning. But safety is the most critical. Enough such that the US government instituted an organization to be created to see to it that there is safety in all the military ammo and military arms that was being produced. And the winds of war were on the horizon anyway. They just got done with the First World War, and they wanted to make sure that things were standardized for safety and performance and interchangeability. So they created this institution called SAAMI, S-A-A-M-I, created during the Roaring Twenties, the Great Depression in 1926. It was named the Sporting Arms and Ammunition Manufacturers Institute. Now, sporting probably was because of the Great Depression and people were concerned how the government was spending money. Well, really, the government wanted standardization for military purposes and sporting civilian secondarily. Now, SAAMI started out doing all the work for the US government, and it took them quite a few years before they got everything standardized enough to make an impact on the civilian markets, and that's why in some publications, all the way up to 1937, SAMI was not really mentioned that much. Reason I know this is because in Phil Sharp's book, Complete Guide to Hand Loading, SAMI is not mentioned. This book was actually printed in 1937. Doesn't mention SAMI, but it does mention the importance of headspace when we're resizing our brass. Well, what Phil Sharp found out was that it was relatively easy to create dangerous excessive headspace because he could get as much as 0.017 inch variation in the way the full-length sizer die was set up and used, that it created a big range of headspace, and excess was very easy to achieve. Now, part of this discussion has come about because SAMI has done such a good job of standardizing the manufacturers of guns and ammunition. That's where you get the Sporting Arms and Ammunition Manufacturers Institute. So it's not just guns, but also the ammo are working together according to SAMI specifications so that we have safety and we have performance and we have interchangeability. However, what Phil Sharp says is absolutely still applicable today, and that is there's a lot of variation that we can get using our full-length resizing dies. So the title of this video is Misconceptions on the Full-Length Resizing Die. Now, you look at reloading manuals today, you look at reloading books, and you read all the reloading instructions that come with all the die equipment and presses, and you really don't see this material being brought out about the possible dangers of not paying attention to what happens to headspace when we full-length resize brass. Now, Hornady does mention it, but they mention it because they want people to buy the headspace comparator. But then when you go ahead and look at headspace comparator instructions, it doesn't really bring out what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, practically speaking, with all the reloading equipment we have, we only have these two commonly encountered practical instruments that reloaders can employ to protect themselves against problems with headspace. And that is the RCBS Precision Mic, which you've seen on some of my other videos, and also the Hornady Comparator, which you've also seen in some of my other videos. But not talking about how this should not be ignored. Now, of course, there are case gauges that you can kind of see when the case goes into the gauge, if it's fitting between the no-go and the go lines, that it's okay. But that's by feel and look, and you really don't know exactly what the dimensions are there. You can still have bad headspace problems if you don't know exactly how much you're off. And by off, let's look at what that means. Now, what you're looking at here is fired brass from my Ruger 308 caliber scout rifle. And by using fired brass, you get a real good indication of the chamber dimensions in terms of headspace. So with the RCBS Precision Mic, what you have here, you put the empty case in, or even a loaded round, and you crank it down until it touches, and it touches the datum line on the brass case right there on the shoulder, and that gives you a reading. And if it's 0, on this scale, that's minimum SAMI specifications. And if you go to 10 on the scale, that's maximum SAMI specifications. So, for instance, let's just take one of these. And you put it in, and there's the vernier, and it reads just a hair over 3. See the little vernier line there? Just a hair over 3. And of course, you need to measure several of them, because you want to see repeatability in your measurements. So see if we can get that one in focus. Can you see the line right there? It's just between 3 and 4. So that's a reliable measurement. So what does this mean? For instance, let's go ahead and take some of this Hornady factory ammunition, and you put that in, and you crank that down, and that's right on 0, which means that Hornady loads this ammunition so that it's right at minimum SAMI specifications, which means it'll fit any SAMI chamber because it's not outside. And if the gun manufacturer makes their chambers on the large side by up to SAMI maximum, this ammo will work fine. So it's in the favor of the ammo maker to load ammo near the SAMI minimum. And you'll find that if you go ahead and check factory brass, it's all either at 0 or 1 or 1.5, something like that. Well, what does that mean for my Ruger Scout rifle? And that is that if we are within 0.003 inches of the chamber headspace and the ammo headspace, and this is 0.003, we have good functioning. In fact, very good reliability. This round will go into the chamber without any trouble at all, even if it's got grit or dirt on it. And when it fires, the brass will stretch 0.003 in the head, and that's still safe for whatever we're going to do with that brass, reloading it. It's not excessive headspace. And if we want to go ahead and use these instruments to adjust our headspace to be less for more accuracy, that's our choice. By the way, the Hornady comparator is very well named because it doesn't really take a measurement of the headspace, but it compares and looks at the difference between the two. So let's go ahead and turn this on. Now here's our brass case, empty from our Ruger. And if I hug the camera, we can put this into the comparator and take a measurement. And you see it says 1624. Well, we'll just take a couple more readings to get that nice and settled, because you gotta settle this end of the case here. Okay, 124, and then we zero it there. That's our chamber. Now let's compare. That's why I call it comparator. Take the loaded round of ammo, and you see it's 0.0035. Well, remember the RCBS measured at 3.5 or a little over 3, and then the factory ammo was at 0, minimum SAMI specifications. This is giving us the same reading. So again, we interpret that as the factory ammo is 0.0035 less headspace than the chamber. So your brass is going to stretch that much, but that's acceptable. It's still safe. It's still good. And if we want less difference than that, we can certainly set our reloading die to give us that. Because as you recall, you can make your full-length resizing die go up to a variance of 0.017. So we can set it for 1,000ths less for maximum accuracy, or 2,000ths less to get a combination of accuracy and functioning. Or, if we're hunting, set it for 0.0035, like the Hornady factory ammo. So you see the difference between these two instruments is this one works on a comparing idea, and this one works with comparing too, but also gives you the exact specifications for minimum and maximum SAMI. And if you want to know the exact measurement in terms of what fraction of an inch, there's a conversion in the instructions that will give you that. Okay, why is this important? What you see here is a bunch of 308 brass that I picked up from the range. This is like 35 years ago. I mean, it was a long time ago when I first started reloading 308. And I didn't know about these things. Who knows, they might not have even been around. I don't remember, but I just went ahead and full-length resized these. And the problem I was getting was that I would full-length resize these and then load them, and some rounds would chamber fine and shoot fine, and other rounds would be very hard to get into the gun. So when I went back to the gun store, and what they did was they said, oh, no, I know what your problem is. You need a set of small base dies. And so I scratched my head and I said, really, I guess, what's that? But okay, go ahead, well, I'll take it, whatever it is. And when I used the small base dies, what they did was they squeezed the head down more to get the smaller base, as if that was what was hanging up the functioning. That wasn't it at all. But I wanted buying small base dies because of this chambering problem. And here's what caused it. Anyway, you see what this says there, that they've been trimmed and they're load ready. And I was going to load these for blasting ammo, but the thing is I never did get around to blasting because I don't go out into the desert to blast things. So anyway, I've got this brass that's been sitting there for 35 years. Let's go ahead and just pull some of it out and see why some of it didn't chamber well and some did. So in my case, it was my M1A. And some of the rounds would not function. They would not go in the battery. And I didn't know what the real cause was, but if you go ahead and either use the comparator or the RCBS Precision mic, and you go ahead and measure these, you'll find that some of them are as big as 0.008 above minimum SAMI specifications. And if the chamber was smaller than that, say around 0.004 or 0.003, those rounds will not chamber. And this is very interesting. The first one I grabbed, can you read that? There's the little scribe line. That's like 0.007. Get that in focus so you can see that, 0.007. That is a pretty oversized round when it comes to headspace. Now, of course, if it's bigger than 0.1, if it's bigger than 10 or 0.010, it's not going to feed in any gun that is a 308 SAMI chamber. So this is getting pretty big. So no wonder it wouldn't chamber. So I measured a bunch more, and then on the fifth one, I got one that'll really open your eyes up. Let me show you this one. Get that in focus. Can you read this one? It's just a hair over 0. So between these 5 cases that were all resized, let's get that in focus. So you see, just measuring 5 of these cases that were chosen on our random, we got one at 1 and one all the way up at 7. So just think what's going to happen if your bolt gun was 0.003. You're trying to seat a bullet into the chamber that's 4 thousandths bigger. Well, you can actually cam 3 thousandths, but you can't cam 4 thousandths, even in a bolt gun. And that would raise cane in a M1A. Now with the comparator is easy. You know we've already got the Ruger Scout Rifle, which is 0.0035, and we went ahead and got that 0.035 and we zeroed it there. Now we close the caliper and we record this 1.624, record that so that we can set this for the Ruger Scout Rifle. That's the chamber size for a Ruger Scout Rifle. And then if we go ahead and put this one in, this was the 0.001 on the RCBS. But if we take the big one, now remember, if it reads 0 on this, it means it's right where the Ruger chamber is. If it's minus, it means it's smaller. If it's plus, it means it's bigger. And we're at, now you gotta get that square. You gotta get this back in square. I'm getting the anvil. The anvil makes it a lot nicer. Now you see the 4? What that means is that's 4 thousandths bigger than the chamber. We're gonna have a hard time getting a action to close on that. Now, however, these things are a nuisance, right? They're really not a factor of safety, because when the rounds are too big, they just don't chamber. And that might be bad in the hunting fields or in an emergency situation, but it's not dangerous if we're just shooting, as a rule. What's dangerous is if you have brass that is more on the excessive headspace side. You see, we can actually set for 0.003 less than the headspace of your chamber, and that's okay. But suppose you had 0.006, or as you saw from Phil Sharp, we can actually have a range of 0.017 using our full-length sizing dies. And even Lee is telling you to give it an extra quarter to third turn. Well, what happens if you give a little bit more and you bump the shoulder back even more? I've seen reloads that were 0.008 inches less than the specified headspace safety. So you got a real unsafe situation there. When you start getting headspace that's around 0.006, the danger of a head separation is getting pretty great. We don't want that. So for safety, these things are extremely important. And so when the reloading manuals tell you about this as something that you might want to get or you should get, well, maybe it's something that's a very good idea. In fact, more stressful to get. Now this happens to cost like over $50. But the Hornady is nice because it'll do everything also, and the cost, I can't remember what it is, but you can use one kit and measure all the calibers with one kit. It's something like $30. So it's very worthwhile getting these types of instruments. Now there is one made by Sinclair, I think, that's kind of like the comparator, but if you're going to get that, you might as well get the Hornady comparator. So you see, with the RCBS precision mic or the Hornady comparator, you know exactly what these things are doing. And you can actually control what these things are doing to give you exactly what you want and nothing else. Bye for now. Take care. Safe shooting to all of you out there.